بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فإن أحسن الكلام كلام الله خير الهدى هدى محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وإن شر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. In the last lesson we started looking at paradise, Jannah and hellfire and Nar as two created things. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He created them and they've been created to be eternal, which means that they will never perish, they will never expire. So in that regard, Imam al-Tahawi, rahimahullah ta'ala, he said, وَالْجَنَّةُ وَالنَّارُ مَخْلُوقَتَانِ لَا تَفْنَيَانِ أَبَدًا وَلَا تَبِيدَانِ وَإِنَّ اللَّهَ تَعَالَى خَلَقَ الْجَنَّةَ وَالنَّارَ قَبْلَ الْخَلْقِ وَخَلَقَ لَهُمَا أَهْلًا. Paradise and hellfire are both created. They will never expire nor perish or cease. And indeed, Allah, the Most High, He created paradise and hellfire before He created the creation. And He created for them inhabitants. So, in the last lesson, we looked at the commentary of Sheikh Zayd al-Madkhali, rahimahullah ta'ala. Today we're going to expand a bit more on this topic from the speech of Sheikh Salih al-Sheikh, hafidhullah. And so, he begins by mentioning that by this statement that we've just heard, that we've just read, that paradise and hellfire are created, they will never perish, they will never expire, they will never end, that this statement obviously is establishing what the Quran and the Sunnah have clearly indicated. And this is that paradise exists right now, paradise exists right now, today it exists right now, and hellfire exists right now, and that paradise was created before the creation of Adam. Paradise was already created before the creation of Adam. And that the hellfire is already present. It is present right now. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He created it just like He created paradise. And further, that for each of these two destinations, for each of these two places, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He created inhabitants. He created inhabitants. Like He said, وَخَلَقَ لَهُمَا أَهْلًا, that He created for them inhabitants. Now this principle of paradise and hellfire, this is from the affairs of the unseen. These are things which we cannot see. And when evidence comes and informs us about something that we cannot see, then it's obligatory for us to affirm that evidence. And we affirm it, we believe in it as it has come, and we submit to Allah, we make taslim, we have iman. And these are from the affairs of the unseen that we cannot fully grasp. Now this is our principle as Ahlul Sunnah. As we said, whatever the evidence comes with from the affairs of the unseen, we make taslim and we accept it. Now there are groups and parties who historically and even today, they oppose this principle of making taslim to the texts, of submitting to the texts. And they have certain principles, innovated principles they use to justify their opposition. And we'll look at that in a short while, inshallah ta'ala. But the people of the Sunnah, our way is that we mention the texts, we mention in our belief, when we list our belief, and when we look at the books written by the Salaf, you'll see that they will mention the belief and then will bring evidences that this is what the Quran, this is what this verse indicates, this is what this hadith indicates, this is what the ijma' of the Sahaba indicates. And they mention the various evidences. And by way of this action, obviously they distinguish themselves from the various sects that went astray, which spoke on these kind of issues, like the Mu'tazila, like the Jahmiyyah, and other than them. So, this topic that we're discussing of paradise and hellfire, are they created now or not? Will they remain forever or not? Will they perish or not? These questions were from the issues in which people began to speak, and they began to speculate, and they began to bring some innovated foreign opinions. Why? Because this issue is connected to Al-Qadar. This issue has a connection to the issue of Al-Qadar, the issue of Allah's decrees, and also has an issue to do with, things being eternal, Allah's actions. Allah's attributes, are they eternal? Allah's actions, is He one who has always been eternally one who speaks and acts? Will He eternally be one who speaks and acts? All of this is connected to Allah's names, His attributes, His actions, and likewise the things which He decrees. Right? So this topic of hellfire, paradise, will it last forever, not last forever? Will it stop? Will it continue? This is connected to that issue. Now, so the reason why people went astray in this is because they wrongly assumed that whatever we cannot see, the things which are from the ghaib, we can't see those things, that they must work and be exactly like the things that we can see. Right? So here they're making a false analogy, where you're trying to take two things and make them equal when they're not equal. It's like in the worldly sense, in the dunya sense, we know that there are many false analogies that can be made. Like someone tries to compare an apple to an orange when they are two totally separate things. Someone tries to compare, a bicycle to an automobile to a car when they're two separate things. You can't compare two things which are unlike. So in a similar way, the unseen, the ghaib, that which we cannot see with our senses, that which we cannot perceive and feel with our senses, which we are unable to see and perceive, that which we can't see, we can't make analogies for it on the basis of what we do see. Why? Because the two things are unlike. The two things are unlike. However, those people who went astray, like the Mu'tazila and the Jahmiyyah and other than them, they went astray on the basis of this principle. They thought that, for example, Allah's actions have to be like the actions of men, or that the things that are unseen, like, for example, on Yawm al-Qiyamah, or the issues of paradise and hellfire and whatever else, that we can only understand them in light of what we see in the creation. So, upon this false principle, they then began to hold certain opinions regarding the reward and punishment in paradise and hellfire respectively, and about Allah's actions. Should paradise end? Should hellfire end? Is it from justice that people are continued to be punished? Is it from justice that people are continued to be rewarded a great deal for actions which are only a small deal? Right? So these kind of things, they use this analogy that what we see in the world, this is exactly how it must be in the unseen. And what we understand to be justice in the actions of men and the deeds of men, that must also apply to the actions of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? So this analogy is false. This qiyas is false. Now, once we've understood this basic the issue, we understand that the evidences for paradise and hellfire already existing, are already created, are many in the Quran and the Sunnah. We'll mention some of them here. From them is the statement of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَيَا آدَمُ اسْكُنْ أَنْتَ وَزَوْجُكَ الْجَنَّةِ. O Adam, reside you and your wife in Al-Jannah, in paradise. Al-Jannah, in paradise. So this shows that paradise was already created. And then Allah informed Adam to reside in this paradise along with his wife. Now this paradise being referred to here is the paradise that we know to be eternal. It is the actual paradise, the eternal paradise. And we see that this same paradise is the one that was described by Allah Azza wa Jal when the Messenger of Allah, when he went upon the Mi'raj, and he said, as occurs in Surah An-Najm, وَلَقَدْ رَآهُ نَزْلَةً أُخْرَى عِنْدَ سِدْرَةِ الْمُنْتَهَى عِنْدَهَا جَنَّةُ الْمَأْوَى. That this paradise is by the tree, the Sidratul Muntaha. And so this shows that when the Messenger was taken up with the Mi'raj, that there was a paradise high in the heaven. And similarly, oppositely to this, he mentions another tree, which is the tree of Zaqum, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he said, وَمَا جَعَلْنَا الرُّؤْيَا الَّتِي أَرَيْنَاكَ إِلَّا فِتْنَةً لِلنَّاسِ وَالشَّجَرَةَ الْمَلْعُونَةَ فِي الْقُرْآنِ. We have not made this vision that Allah showed you except as a tribulation for mankind. And the accursed tree mentioned in the Quran, referring here to the tree of Az-Zaqum. And here the Messenger of Allah, he was shown this likewise he was shown this. And when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he mentioned the condition of the people of the hellfire, he mentioned that same tree. The same tree. And this we see in Surah Ad-Dukhan, Inna shajarat az-zaqum ta'amul athim kal-muhli yaghli fil butun ka-ghalyi al-hamim. Just describing this tree. That indeed, the tree of az-zaqum is the food of the criminal, the sinful ones. And he went on to mention some of its qualities. So the point being that from these evidences we can see that paradise existed before Adam alayhi salam and hellfire exists right now. Why? Because the Messenger of Allah, he was shown these things, these affairs. He was shown many affairs from the unseen, punishment of the grave, and he saw that the tree of Zaqum and other things which I mentioned. Likewise, some other evidences from the Sunnah, the fact that the souls of the believers, or the spirit or the soul of the believer, is like like a tree is like a bird which goes and hangs off the fruits from the trees of paradise. And likewise, the souls of the martyrs, that the souls of the martyrs are in the bodies of birds, green birds, which travel in paradise and which move around in paradise. And likewise the statement of Allah Azza wa Jal in the Quran regarding the martyrs, بَلْ أَحْيَاءٌ عِنْدَ رَبِّهِمْ يُرْزَقُونَ فَرِحِينَ بِمَا آتَاهُمُ اللَّهُ مِنْ فَضْلِهِ وَيَسْتَبْشِرُونَ بِالَّذِينَ لَمْ يَلْحَقُوا بِهِمْ مِنْ خَلْفِهِمْ أَلَّا خَوْفٌ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا هُمْ يَحْزَنُونَ. This ayah in Ali Imran. Do not think that they are dead, meaning to talking about the martyrs. Rather, they are living, being provided for with their Lord. Being provided for with their Lord. Rejoicing with that which Allah has given them from their bounty. So this shows that the martyrs are receiving sustenance, being provided for, and that they are rejoicing basically with the reward that they are receiving. So these are just a small number of evidences from the Quran, from the Sunnah. There are many others. The point being, in short, that paradise is present now and hellfire is present now. And that for each of these two places there are inhabitants. So at some, on Yawm al-Qiyamah, the inhabitants of paradise will enter paradise and the inhabitants of hellfire will enter hellfire. Now, we've established this position by way of the evidences as you've seen, because of clear evidences in the Quran and the Sunnah. Now that's the basic introduction to the text that we read. And now there are some masail, there are some issues that we can discuss. So the first issue is about the statement, Al-Jannatu wal-Naru makhluqatan. Al-Jannatu wal-Naru makhluqatan. Paradise and hellfire are both created. This means that Allah's creation of them has actually completed. It is already completed. There is nothing else left. Nothing depends, for example, upon the establishing, when the hour is established, where the earth is changed and the heavens are changed and everything is, a new earth comes, the new heavens come, and as if paradise will then form and become, and hellfire will then be brought, and it's not like as in created. There's nothing like that. They already are created and are completed in their creation. And as for what we see mentioned in the Quran, that the heavens will change, that the earth will change, that the heavens will change, this does not apply to paradise and hellfire. Like we see, for example, in Surah Ibrahim, Surah Ibrahim, verse number 48, which is Surah number 14, verse number 48, يَوْمَ تُبَدَّلُ الْأَرْضُ غَيْرَ الْأَرْضِ وَالسَّمَاوَاتِ. The day on which the earth will be changed to another earth, a different earth, and likewise the heavens. This is in Surah Ibrahim, Surah 14, verse 48. So this applies to the heavens and the earth. This does not apply to paradise and to hellfire, because heavens and earth have their own affair, and hellfire and paradise have their own affair. They are two created things, and no one knows when exactly and when specifically they were created except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We don't really know specifically when was paradise created, specifically when was hellfire created. But we know that they were created, and we know paradise was created before the creation of Adam alayhi salam, and we know that hellfire already exists as we speak. So the evidence being here that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He mentioned Ya Adam uskun anta wa zawjuka al-jannah. O Adam, reside you and your wife in al-jannah. Paradise here was mentioned with al, with a definite article, with al. And when the definite article is used, then there's a term, a grammatical term, it is for al-ahad, lil-ahad. And so this means that this paradise that's already mentioned before, that is already existing before, then this is known as the place of bliss. So they are both created. We don't know exactly when they were created, but they were definitely created. And in the case of paradise, before the creation of Adam alayhi salam. The second issue is that he said, لا تفنيان أبدا ولا تبيدان. لا تفنيان ولا أبدا ولا تبيدان. That they will never expire, nor will they perish. They will never expire, nor will they perish. Which means that paradise was created to remain forever, and paradise was created to remain forever. And this is what the Quran and the Sunnah have clearly indicated. As with respect to the fire, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, يَسْأَلُكَ النَّاسُ عَنِ السَّاعَةِ قُلْ إِنَّمَا عِلْمُهَا عِنْدَ اللَّهِ وَمَا يُدْرِيكَ لَعَلَّ السَّاعَةَ تَكُونُ قَرِيبًا إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَعَنَ الْكَافِرِينَ وَأَعَدَّ لَهُمْ سَعِيرًا خَالِدِينَ فِيهَا أَبَدًا لا يجدون وليا ولا نصيرا. They ask you about the hour. The people ask you about the hour. Say, indeed, the knowledge of it is with Allah. And what will inform you that perhaps the hour might be close at hand? Indeed, Allah has cursed the disbelievers and has prepared for them a fire, sa'ira. They will reside therein forever. They will not find any aider or helper, nor any wali, any protector, guardian, nor any aider. Surah Al-Ahzab, Surah 33, verse 63 onwards, 63 to 65. Now, so this is clearly an indication. Khalidina fiha abada. We see it frequently in the Quran, and likewise with respect to paradise, we see many verses in the Quran that mention Khalidina fiha abada. So this is clear that these texts in the Quran make it very clear for Ahlul Sunnah that paradise and hellfire were created to remain forever. To remain forever. Now, there's a point that we can mention here before we continue in this explanation, which is that just because something will remain for eternity after it was created and it didn't exist, does not mean that Allah is not the last after whom there is none. Do you understand that? Yeah? Allah is al-Baqi. He is al-Akhir. He is the one who will remain forever. He is the one who is the last. Right? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can create things. Like, for example, He's created paradise. He's created hellfire. And those things will remain forever. Will remain forever. But that does not mean, that does not change the fact that He is al-Baqi, al-Akhir. And likewise the other way around as well. That if we know that eternally going backwards, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because He is the one who does whatever He wills, that He has been creating things that we do not know of, going back in eternity, but every single one of those creations came to be after not being. That does not clash with the fact that He is the first, al-awwal, before whom there is none. Right? So keep that in mind. So the fire then, the fire that we are speaking of here, al-maqsood bin nar, here is that the hellfire will remain forever. And from here now that we've established that paradise and hellfire will remain forever, from here now we come to the various sayings that depart from the saying of Ahlul Sunnah. Right? So we've established paradise is created now, hellfire is created now, paradise will remain forever, hellfire will remain forever. We look at the proofs for all of that. Now here we come to the groups. And basically there are many different sayings, but two of the most important sayings. The first of them is the ones who say that paradise and hellfire will come to an end at a certain time. And what will happen is that at that point, whatever pleasure the people of paradise are having and whatever punishment the people of hellfire are having will stop, and they won't refresh or renew. And it will then stop, and then eventually hellfire and paradise will end. Right? So everything will come to an end. And the reason why they said this, what was the reason why they said this? This all goes back to, philosophical nonsense. Right? They said, well, every motion that begins, every motion that begins, it has to stop at some point. Right? So that means that the people of paradise can't keep going forever having motion. And the people of hellfire can't keep going forever having motion. All motion that has a beginning must also come to an end. Right? This is just philosophical nonsense that they've taken from, the philosophy of other nations. And so they said, for that reason, paradise and hellfire there must be a point at which they stop. And so basically, hellfire will perish, and the fire itself will perish, and the people of paradise, everything will cease, and their reward will stop and expire, and it will cease, and then paradise will finish and expire. This is the view of the Jahmiyyah, and others other than them as well. And second statement that opposes the view of Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah is that although paradise and hellfire will remain, they won't perish, they won't end, they will still remain, but the punishment within them will be cut off. The punishment in hellfire will be cut off, and the reward in paradise will be cut off. And then after this, Allah Azza wa Jal will do whatever He wills with paradise or with hellfire. He'll do whatever He wills. And the reason why they say this is because they say, how can Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give an eternal reward, a never-ending reward for righteous actions which are only very small in comparison? And the other way around, how can Allah punish eternally for actions, for crimes, for sins, for actions which really are only small in comparison? How is this from justice? How can this How does this agree with justice? Right? So again, see, what they're doing is they are trying to use the analogy with the things that we see in the creation and saying that this is how it must be in the unseen. Right? It's like, obviously, and obviously there's a longer discussion about why this is false. We can't elaborate upon it here. But as we said, they see what justice is in the dunya, where we see that a person is punished for a crime in a way that fits the crime. And then using this analogy, what they see in the life of this world, they then try to make analogies for what is from the unseen. And again, this analogy is false, and the explanation of that obviously has a detailed discussion. But the point being that this is the underlying principle or the underlying thought that they have in why they denied paradise being forever and hellfire being forever. But anyway, these are the two main statements. There are other statements as well, but these are the two most prominent misguided statements.
That was Jahmi, the first one.
First one was the Jahmiyyah. The second one, basically, it's the statement of the Mu'tazila. In essence, what they say is that the people of paradise will freeze and the people of hellfire will freeze. Meaning they'll just freeze and stop and remain like that. Right? That's it. Everything will just stop and cease. Right? This is a statement of Abu Hudayl al-Allaf. He was one of the heads of the Mu'tazila. And the first statement was a statement of Jahm bin Safwan from the Jahmiyyah. Now, as for the statement of Ahlul Sunnati wal Jama'ah, we've already established that they are already created, paradise and hellfire. They will never perish, they will never cease, they will never expire. People of paradise will continue receiving pleasure, bliss, benefits forever, and those inhabitants of the hellfire will continue receiving punishment forever. And it is authentically related from the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that on the Day of Judgment, يُؤْتَى يَوْمُ الْقِيَامَةِ بِالْمَوْتِ عَلَى هَيْئَةِ كَبَشٍ. On the Day of Judgment, death will be brought in the form of a ram and will be sacrificed between paradise and hellfire. And it will be said, it will be announced by an announcer, O people of paradise, خُلُود فَلَا مَوْتٍ, eternity, no death. And O people of the fire, eternity and no death. Right? So this is a clear evidence from the Sunnah of the eternity of paradise and hellfire, and there will be no death. No death for the people of paradise, no death for the people of hellfire. Now, as we said, the eternity of paradise and hellfire is clearly stated in the Quran. Many ayat which would say, for example, خَالِدِينَ فِيهَا أَبَدًا, which is mentioned for both the inhabitants of hellfire and the inhabitants of paradise. Now that this is clear, we've clearly understood the view of Ahlul Sunnah and the view of the misguided statements of some of the other groups. There's some detail now, because there were from the people of the Sunnah who said that from the fire, that the hellfire or from the fire is that which will perish and come to an end. And this is because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will cause this fire to perish and expire. Which fire is this? It is the fire that is the rank or the level of the muwahhideen from the believers in hellfire, which is the highest level of the fire. Why? Because the believers, the muwahhidun, have been promised to be taken out of hellfire after their sins have been expiated. So no one will remain in the hellfire who has an atom's weight of iman in his heart, and there must be some point at which they will be taken out of the hellfire, because they have tawheed with them. And so even if they remain for a period, that fire that was punishing them will eventually expire and they will be taken out from the hellfire. And this view is ascribed to some of the Salaf. There are some narrations, there's some issues with their authenticity. They're not really established. There's some speech about the authenticities of these narrations, and some weakness. But they say basically that the people of the fire will remain therein, but there will be a day on which they will be taken out. And likewise, so this is one view, but again, this view can have a certain interpretation, right? We can say that this view that the Salaf were referring only to a part of the fire, not the entire fire. So yes, the fire will perish, but a part of it that relates only to the punishment of the muwahhidun in paradise. And likewise, another view which is ascribed to some of the people of the Sunnah from some of the leading Imams and scholars is that for hellfire to perish, to come to an end, is something which is mumkin, right? It is something that we can deem to be possible or permissible. And that for it to expire isn't something that is impossible. And this view is ascribed to Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah and Ibn al-Qayyim and some others as well. And obviously there's some debate about as to whether this really was the view of Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah. And as for Ibn al-Qayyim, then he discusses both of the views. Is hellfire eternal? Is hellfire, going to end? And he mentioned all the evidences for both views, and it seemed as if he inclined towards the view that maybe hellfire could possibly come to an end, or maybe it will come to an end. It seems as if he was inclined to that view, but without actually fully committing himself to that view. And obviously, in his books, there's a number of different views, and it seems that maybe this was an earlier view, and in his later books, he tended to the view that hellfire will not perish. But anyway, because of this reason, because of the scholars wrote on this issue, because they found statements from the Salaf, then this is why these opinions exist. And this is one of those such opinions, which is the view that it is possible for hellfire to come to an end, without saying it will come to an end. They're saying that it is mumkin, it is possible that it could come to an end. What is the reason for this? And the reasoning for this is as follows. Now think about the reasoning. The reasoning is that when we look at Allah's attributes, we see that Allah's rewarding of the believers is on the basis of His mercy, on the basis of rahmah, that He is the most merciful. And the attribute of ar-rahmah is a sifa which is dhatiyya, meaning it is a permanent attribute of His self. Allah is always merciful. His attribute of mercy is permanent. And paradise obviously is one of the manifestations of His mercy. And if His mercy is a permanent attribute, it means that His rewarding of the people through paradise will also be eternal. Do you understand that? Yeah, that point, yeah? That because Allah is eternal, His attribute of mercy is a sifatun dhatiyya. It's an attribute of mercy. It's an attribute of His essence which is eternal. And so therefore, if His attribute is eternal, it follows that paradise, which is a manifestation of His mercy, should also therefore be eternal. Right, in keeping with the attribute which is eternal. And as we find mentioned, Anta rahmati arhamu bika man asha. This is hadith Qudsi, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaking about paradise, that you are my mercy, and I show mercy by way of you to whomever I will. Right? So if we keep this in mind, we'll then understand the issue of the hellfire. The hellfire is the punishment of Allah which is related to His anger, His ghadab. Why is someone being punished in the hellfire? Because Allah is angry with him, because of Allah's anger. Now the ghadab of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a sifatun ikhtiyariya, fi'liya. It is not like the attribute of rahmah. It is not like the attribute of mercy. It is an attribute which is tied to Allah's will and wish. His ikhtiyar, his, if He wills, He'll become angry. If He wills, He'll become pleased. And this attribute is not an attribute that ever becomes a permanent attribute of His essence. Like rahmah, like mercy. And if the effect of his anger, which is hellfire, just like paradise is the effect, is a manifestation of his mercy. If the effect of his anger, which is hellfire, became permanent, it would mean that his anger would also be permanent. Right? Then that means his anger would have been permanent forever. It would have made it an attribute to be the same as his rahmah, but they are not the same. And so this would mean that this attribute has now become a permanent attribute of Allah's essence, which is not the case, because so long as he's punishing, that means he's angry with them, and if they're going to be punished for eternity, that means the anger has now become a permanent attribute of his essence. So this cannot be the case. Right? So with this reasoning, they said that it is mumkin, it is possible to conceive that hellfire can come to an end at some point in the future. Now, this view, obviously it's been discussed by the ulama, and what we understand is that this appears to be the statement and the position of Ibn al-Qayyim and Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala. And he mentions a quotation here from Ibn al-Qayyim that I asked Ibn Taymiyyah about this. And he said, this is a great and mighty issue. This issue is a great and mighty issue. And then he mentioned he mentioned the various evidences. And then Ibn al-Qayyim said, look, what is the final say in this matter? Right? Because we know there are evidences for this view, we know there are evidences for that view, but what is the final say in this matter? And so Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah he basically said, what is your final position in this matter? He said, the final position that we've reached at is the statement of Allah Jalla wa Ala, Inna Rabbaka fa'alun lima yurid. Indeed, your Lord is the doer of whatever He wills. This is what we come back to, that we resign to this statement of Allah, that Allah has said, indeed Allah is the doer of whatever He wills. Meaning that if He wanted to, He could make hellfire come to an end. And if He wanted to, He could make hellfire continue. Now, obviously this is a great and mighty, complex issue. And as you can see that even some of the people of knowledge, there are statements from them, some detailed issues in relation to hellfire. And it's an issue in which too much delving should not be entered into. And as you can see from Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, he said the final issue that we arrive at after all of this complex discussion and debate and looking at the evidences for one view or the other view, at the end of it all we basically say, Inna Rabbaka fa'alun lima yurid. Indeed, your Lord is the one who does whatever He wills. Right, so this brings us to the end of that issue, which is the issue of the eternity of paradise and hellfire. And I think what we'll do is we'll come to a conclusion on that point, and we'll continue discussing the remaining points in the next lesson, inshallah ta'ala. Just basically to summarize then, really we looked at two or three things. The proofs and evidences to show that paradise is already created before Adam alayhi salam, but we don't know exactly when or specifically when. But we know it was before Adam alayhi salam, and that paradise is and that hellfire is already created as we speak, and that on Yawm al-Qiyamah it is the heavens and the earth which will be transformed and changed, but paradise and hellfire will not be changed because they are two created things which are other than the heavens and the earth. So they have a separate treatment compared to the heavens and the earth. And thirdly, that there are inhabitants for either one, all of which comes from the ilm of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we shall expand upon that in the lessons to come. And that paradise, of course, is eternal, it will never come to an end. And hellfire likewise, from the evidences in the Quran, it is apparent, and which is held by the scholars of the Sunnah, that hellfire likewise is eternal and will never perish. And then we mentioned some heretical sayings, those who claim that both paradise and hellfire will either perish, or those who say that the people of paradise and hellfire will freeze and no longer, the rewards will be cut off and the punishment will be cut off. So even though paradise will remain, hellfire will remain, everyone will just freeze, and there will be no more punishment, no more reward. Right? So these are clearly deviant sayings. They are clearly deviant sayings, which are clearly wrong and misguided, and they are based upon incorrect assumptions and analogies. But then we looked at some statements of some of the people of the Sunnah, which can have their own explanation, and one of them was that the hellfire, when we say that it will come to an end, then it means a part of the hellfire that relates only to the muwahhidun, right? So the statement of some of the scholars, yes, hellfire will come to an end, can be understood in that way. That's one understanding. And the second understanding is that hellfire coming to an end is something that we can say is mumkin in light of general considerations. The fact that Allah's rahmah is a permanent attribute, and the fact that His ghadab is a temporary attribute. Right? So this view, generally, this kind of notion is something which we can find explained in the books of Shaykh al-Islam Ibn al-Qayyim, and it is also ascribed to Ibn Taymiyyah, though there's a dispute as to whether this really is his view or not, and the scholars have generally differed on that. But in general, one of the views is that they basically changed their view in the later books, as with Ibn al-Qayyim, and he held the view that hellfire will not perish. But that's the basic issue in a nutshell. But as you can see, it's from the great, mighty, complex issues, and we'll touch upon the issues that come after this now, inshallah ta'ala, in the next lesson. So that will conclude our lesson here today. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.